r/askreddit. Redditors who grew up with shady criminal parents. What did your mom or dad teach you was okay to do that you later learned was illegal or seriously frowned upon? Serious. I have fond memories of hanging out in the shed with my parents, me playing with my dolls and them harvesting their money trees, weed strewn all over the floor, hanging from the ceiling. The leaves made into a little bed for my Barbie to sleep in. TBH, the Barbie bed part is kind of cute. My dad's no serious criminal, but petty in every way, including the crime he commits. I was basically taught to play dumb, act like you belong, and you can do whatever you want. We snuck into VIP lounges, other people's buffets and parties at restaurants and events. He once lied to a ticketer at a movie theater and got mad when they couldn't find the tickets he ordered online. He had not ordered tickets, but there was a huge line and he didn't want to wait. We got in for free and cut a huge line. Also cut lines at Disney Worlds and other sorts of places. Did you carry this into adulthood? Did you have to unlearn any of it? My dad stole a few things in a sneaky way so my brother and I would have won each. In one instance, for example, he bought a Game Boy game. He brought it back to the car, removed the cartridge, and took it back into the store saying the case was empty. He did the same thing with those Pikachu Tamagotchi things. I think his biggest steal was a PlayStation 2. He actually did purchase one. My mum went in and picked it up, but when leaving the store, the door person didn't tear the receipt. So, my dad took the receipt back in, picked up another PS2, stuck the receipt on it and walked out. The door person tore the receipt this time but obviously didn't pay attention to the time of sale. Dad also ran a huge business of installing chips in PlayStations so they could play copied games. He would rent games, burn a copy, then sell copies to other people. We had a whole library and catalog of copied games and Dad had quite a few customers. Looking back, I see how dodgy it was and why he told me not to tell too many people about it. Dad also ran a huge business of installing chips in PlayStations so they could play copied games. He would rent games, burn a copy, then sell copies to other people. We had a whole library and catalog of copied games and Dad had quite a few customers. Looking back, I see how dodgy it was and why he told me not to tell too many people about it. That was a big thing back in the 90s, early zeros. I know that was where 95% of my games came from because my dad knew some guy who knew some guy, whatever. I was a kid and had access to every single game I wanted, so why would I care? Haha. My sister. She's 18 years older than me, so my mom would occasionally leave me with her. Sometimes for the day, a couple times for 5 days. It was some of the most fucked up times. I fucking hate that woman to this day. Don't even bother giving me the Ocean addict. Poor her. Be kinder to her. No. She also let both of her ex-husbands touch my niece. She was so negligent, I'm shocked that we didn't have worse shit happen. I hope your niece is okay, or on her way to being okay. Your sister is seriously fucked up. My family did a lot of petty, trashy crime, shoplifting, theft, domestic assault, drugs, etc. I thought it was normal for adults to just kinda go to jail every few years for a day or two until I was 10. Now, my stepdad is out of my life, my mom is too old ill to do anything particularly bad, and my dad may have helped finance a district attorney's election, which has saved him mountains in legal fees for himself and the hookers he frequents. Yes. It took me a long time to get over my confusion that not everyone at my school knew all of the police officers by name during the DARE program. Small town. Not because someone in my family was a cop, but because I thought they just showed up at everyone's houses all the time, just like me. Funny how we assume everyone lives similar lives when we are kids. I never knew we weren't allowed to drink at the local fair. Mom used to bring beer in a cooler when we went, until I was 21 and a cop stopped me when I was walking around with a beer. There is a public event that meant to be alcohol free here. They check all your bags going in. My aunt premixes gin and tonic in those plastic Chinese takeout containers, adds a slice of lemon and calls it soup. The part that makes me laugh is when she sits there on the picnic blanket eating her soup with a spoon. Did you get a ticket? So this question brings up a very specific memory. My dad never said explicitly that what he was doing was acceptable, but he certainly didn't tell me that this was wrong. I'm between the ages of 5-7, unsure about a specific timeline on this, and my mom is often working in the evenings while my dad is sporadically around. One night, while my mom is gone, dad gathers me to go for an adventure. Usually this means driving around the city and looking at stuff. Well, dad pulls up to a hospital and parks. He sits with me in the car and gives me a script, saying that we recently moved here, a lie, and that he had hurt his back while moving boxes, mega lie. I play along because hey, it's my dad and sure, whatever he says goes. Any other specifics from that night are hazy. I think he managed to talk his way into some sort of painkiller prescription. This was in the early zeros, so opiates weren't as visible as now. My dad has been in successful treatment since then, but man, that's a big memory that stands out for how screwed up my younger life was. My parents grew weed. I helped out in the grow room from age 4. We live in the UK, so it's illegal here, but it's always just been a part of everyday life, and I've been around so much of it for so long that I forget it's even illegal. My dad was a mechanic. The ones that stick out was when he would charge for a new replacement part and then go to the local junkyard and get the part from there. If the customer asked upfront, he would be honest and offer the two options. Junkyard part equals cheap but likely reliable, or new equals expensive and only parts warranty. If they didn't ask, most of the time it was a junkyard part. Rarely got in trouble or called out since his prices were a fraction of regular shops. Oh, I guess the other main shady part was that he wasn't a legit certified mechanic and most business was cash under the table. His apprentice is now my mechanic and he learned from my dad's mistakes. He provides receipts, boxes, and shows me where he installed the new part, and it's always shiny and new, minus obvious grease handling installation marks. He learned that cleaning before installing is key. Thanks, Dad Mechanic. A family friend was in the import-export business for gemstones. I didn't realize it could be illegal to transport gems across borders. We would have gem parties where a dining table that can sit 12 would be completely covered in bowls of gems and jewelry to buy. Same as Tupperware parties, but for gems. Some stones my parents got appraised shocked their jeweler. Super rare colors of different stones that they had never seen before. That friend has gone legit, owned some mines in Africa now. So what you are saying is he is an even bigger and worse criminal now? I used to be told everything was okay as long as you don't get caught. They kind of said it like a throwaway phrase, but I really took it to heart. It gave me a real lack of respect for any authority at all and made it seem more like a game than real life consequences. I would do illegal shit just to get the rush of wondering and whether or not I'd be caught. Once I was caught, I would just shrug and act like their winning didn't bother me. Kinda like their punishment was just them gloating about me getting caught. This is actually really interesting. My husband works with kids who go through some rough times. And this explanation of a kid's point of view explained so much. Thanks for sharing. My parents would often get me to answer the phone as a young kid, like 4-5 and older. Anyways, they people on the phone always asked if Jones Mollusk was there. My parents would coach me, no, Jones Mollusk lives here, you don't know who that is. Well, as a kid I really didn't have a clue who Jones Mollusk was, because dad was always just dad or went by his nickname. Didn't find out for years what my dad's real name was. I guess I helped my parents evade a few debt collectors and God knows what else. Also, me and my sister used to go play Barbies in Daddy's clubhouse. It was our favorite place. Dad built it himself in our backyard and they even had a big bar and a pool table, and they brought a velvet couch for me and my sister to play on while dad played pool and visited with all my uncles. Dad always called it his clubhouse too, so when people asked where my dad was I'd say dad was probably in his clubhouse. To which my mom would always get so mad at me and I'd be so confused because that's what dad and everyone else called it, but I wasn't supposed to talk about it apparently. Haha. Yeah, my dad was in a biker gang. My family has some members in the Italian mafia. Most of them are dead now. As a child nothing really stood out. Just felt like that side of the family was really close. Used to hang out with my uncle Alec. I loved hanging out with him because we would visit different shops all around town and he would buy me food, toys, etc. I remember sometimes seeing money being exchanged between my uncle and the different shopkeepers. The people seemed happy enough to see my uncle, like they were long lost friends. It wasn't till years later after his death that my mom told me that he was involved in extortion at the time. Since then I've heard stories about other family members who have passed on, and my uncle was probably the tamest out of them all. Edit. For those asking about how most of them died. Kind of a boring answer. Both of my uncles died of cancer. My aunt went full-blown crazy, talking to pets and people that weren't there. Towards the end she didn't recognize her own family. My other aunt died from falling out of bed and breaking her hip too many times. Grandfather died from cancer. Grandmother died from alcoholism. My mom still hates her for that. My other grandparents were already dead before I was born. I don't think anybody died in prison, but I know a few family members who did go. Mostly white collar crimes. One cousin was locked up on fraud charges, but I found out later that it was really the only thing they could lock him up for. People had a tendency to disappear around him. That cousin died from a car accident many years later. Nothing really stood out as a kid. Even as an adult, it isn't really noticeable unless you know what you are looking for. Shoplifting for the most part, I mean, like she never made us do it, but she didn't hide what she was doing either. She's the reason model homes have cameras now, lol. Quite a few things. Backstory: my bio dad was convicted of murder. Got away with another murder through claiming self-defense. No clue if it was truly self-defense. And apparently had a third murder that he never got caught for. He would steal constantly from people to things inside stores. One of my earliest memories is wanting this super cute pink hat. I believe I was around 8. He put it on my head and told me to walk to the car. I remember asking about paying and he said, "Don't worry, just walk." So, little me walks to the outside doors with her heart pounding, and then the alarm goes off. I freeze and run back to my dad that was still shopping. First lesson I can remember I learned: you just need to keep walking when those alarms go off. He died a few years back. My brothers and I are decent people. My brother is a great dad, despite who he had as a dad. I had a similar childhood with regards to stealing and shoplifting. I remember being told to just put whatever I wanted from the store into the shopping cart, absolutely anything. And then my mom had me, 13, and my niece, 8, take the cart out to the car while she and my older sister trailed about 50 feet behind us. We just walked out with the whole cart. I guess my sister knew the cashier at the time and they had a deal where the cashier would just look the other way and not see anything. Self-preservation eventually took over. In the middle of the parking lot I abandoned the shopping cart and my niece and then speed walked home to my mom's. I'm hindsight, I probably shouldn't have left my niece, but my fight or flight response kicked in. I was and still am terrified of prison. My mom has spent some time there and having to visit her there has left an impression. Edit. As a more light-hearted story, I lived with my dad and his parents for most of my childhood and I was taught that margarine was better than butter. I don't remember having butter until I was 11. Found out years later that my grandparents used sell margarine illegally from their bar. Margarine was illegal in Wisconsin until like 1967. I guess the law was relaxed after that to allow restaurants to buy and use margarine, but not regular people. My grandparents took full advantage of this. There were a lot of weird things I didn't think much of as a kid but realized were fucked up as an adult. Like how our family moved 13 times in 15 years. I just assumed people got new houses all the time. And how sometimes I would go to the freezer for some ice cream and find stacks of cash in the containers. Just weird shit like that. I lost a textbook in my deep freeze once as a kid, grade 5ish. I still don't know how. It's not fair for me to ask you a question without sharing something of my own. My mother was pretty shady. She was a opioid and benzo addict who took me doctor shopping from place to place looking for prescriptions. She faked seizures and had a rolling list of medical complaints. I don't know if she believed all of her illnesses were real, but she sure acted like she did around us and medical staff. She taught me that it was okay to manipulate doctors, but somehow I grew up to be exactly the opposite and that I feel embarrassed and guilty seeking medical care even for a legitimate complaint.